you guys had heroes or gang leaders? That's awesome. Are they on Rope-A-Dope now?
All right, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in our world. Pleasure to hear you and be with you. My name is Fabian Brown. I'm here with Rope-A-Dope, and I'm here, listen, I'm here with an extraordinary individual, Mr. Dekel Bor, who just recently had an album release titled Let Love Rule. But today's programming is in regards to Let Love Rule, its remix concert, and we are here with a very special guest, Mr. Matt Mirowitz, who is an extraordinary publicist here in the United States. And I'm very much looking forward to the conversation and all things publicity with Matt Mirowitz and Dekel Bor leading the conversation. As a quick few housekeeping rules, if you guys have questions, just please put those questions here in the chat. I'll make sure that our host and our guests will receive those messages. Another piece of housekeeping rules: if you guys just keep your lines muted while you're not talking, that would be wonderful. I'll be your moderator here today, Fabian Brown again from Rope-A-Dope, and Dekel, I'll leave the call with you, my friend.
Hey everyone, this is a super exciting day. It's release week, and the album finally came in today. Super excited about that. It looks fantastic. It sounds the best that I could at the time, and we decided to extend whoever's buying it through Bandcamp will be sent a Zoom link for a call with me to tell you all about the album. We're extending that from Bandcamp Day. So now that the album is out, what do I do now? We have the absolute pleasure of having an industry legend with us tonight with some advice, ideas, experience, wisdom. I've been hearing about Matt for I think roughly 10 years now, and usually when you in the musician circle, it's rare to hear about an industry person to be spoken in this way. It's really rare, and Matt's work has been garnering some really unbelievable acclaim and unbelievable results. But to me, what speaks volumes is the relationships that he has and the longevity of those relationships. In an industry where it's very common to see people jumping from one agency to the other, Matt's been working with his family of artists for some of them for 15 or over that kind of years. So Matt, thanks for coming. Thanks for indulging me.
Sure. Nice to be here.
You guys are based in New York, so it's hit you pretty hard. How you guys been in the last few months?
So I live a little bit outside New York, 1 hour outside the city, but it was quite bad here. Just riding it out. I had a lot of work through, I guess, July, and then I kind of, I feel like I have a little bit less in the fall, but that's to be expected. Musicians, most of my clients are independent artists, a few labels. I work with Biophilia Records right now, and Fidelity, and a small label called Dow Forms, which is more of an avant-garde label. I here and there I work on Rope-A-Dope projects. Most recently, Aaron Parks and Little Big, Dreams of a Mechanical Man, and So it's been okay. I mean, yes, New York has been hit very hard, but we're okay. And my team is dispersed. I have one person in Brooklyn who does social media consulting for me. I have one person who's my operations manager who lives in, he normally lives in Brooklyn, but he's now in LA. I have another guy who works for me as a freelance publicist, just on a contract basis. he's also in Brooklyn. So we're different areas. I'm in Westchester County, but I used to live in Brooklyn for many years and the city for about 10 years. So yeah.
So it's great to hear you all safe. Touching on Corona times, which we would say are the 3 or so albums that inspire you during this couple months at home with time to listen?
Um, so I'm gonna go to my Bandcamp actually, because that's where I've been doing the majority of my music purchasing and listening lately. I would have to say this Tineke Postma record called Freya with Chris Davis and Ralph Alessi and Matt Brewer and Dan Weiss, and it's on
It's an edition, right?
it's on Edition Records. Yeah, it's a really good record. That's one that I listen to a lot. Another one that I listen to a lot is this Chicago Underground Quartet, which is Rob Mazurek, Chad Taylor, Josh Johnson, who's the youngest member, and Chad. Where is it? I can't remember. Chicago Underground. Yeah, it's called Good Days. It's on Astral Spirits Records, and it's Chad, Jeff Parker on guitar, Rob Mazurek on trumpet and electronics, and Josh Johnson on synth bass and organ and piano. I'm trying not to drop client names because that feels a little bit funny. I've been listening a lot to now I'm thinking. If I actually, there's a young lady by the name of Hannah Marks, who's a bassist, who I saw on the Jazz Gallery live lockdown sessions, and she had kind of an interesting style, and she sang as well. She's a double bassist, but a couple years ago she put out a record with a group called Heartland Trio, and it's called Year One. It's just heartlandtrio.bandcamp.com, and I've really been digging that album a lot. Really nice mix, and very good players. Some guy named Barclay Moffat on tenor sax, and Rocky Martin on drums, and then Hannah plays bass and sings. It's really good.
I'll look it up.
Yeah.
So, just to the uninitiated or yet to be initiated, what is the publicist's role for an artist?
So the publicist is typically the go-between between artist and the press, the media. But these days, oftentimes, a publicist has the role of kind of doing a lot of different things, acting as like a sort of a temporary manager of sorts. We have a kind of a different approach lately, especially for clients who have the need for distribution advice, label, all the things that a label would normally do for an artist. We try to fill in that gap if they don't have a label, or even if they're working with a label, we try to advise on best practices on how to release singles and how to be timely with your social media promotion and how to kind of craft a story. One of the biggest things is crafting a story for yourself, whether it's your personal story or a story about the music that kind of brings it to life, especially for a non-musician audience, non-insider audience. So that's typically what a publicist does. They tell that story to the media, and then typically we start. Ideally, you want to hire a publicist. You want to reserve your publicist about 6 months before you release your record or you plan to release your record, and then we start working about 3 to 4 months before the album comes out. Sometimes a little bit less, but a very effective campaign is starting about 3 or 4 months before the album comes out. That gives you the greatest chance of the best results just in terms of getting in the line of releases that people are constantly sent, whether it's digital or physical mailings. Some critics, especially those over 40, definitely prefer physical product in the jazz world. I work primarily in the jazz world. But my colleagues in the electronic music world and indie rock and hip hop, they all deal almost exclusively in digital. And I do a good amount of digital myself, but there are critics for this music that are older, that have a style of listening that is a little bit older school. They didn't grow up with streaming. They didn't grow up even with downloads. So it's when I say grow up, they came up in the business. And for a lot of writers, to be very honest, the payment is the product that you send them, the physical product, because a lot of the reviewers today, they don't make much or any money from reviewing. So the very professional ones, the ones who work for NPR and the New York Times and Wall Street Journal and so on, they get paid. But many of them are freelancers. Many of them are not salaried. Many of them have no health insurance from the media outlets that they're working as freelancers for. And that's a major issue that needs to be addressed in general. But I see myself kind of as both an advocate for artists and organizations, but also as like an advocate for journalists and the media, because even though I'm not working for the media, I understand their struggle, and I personally try to subscribe to as many publications or websites that I can. Some of them I support on Patreon. Some of them I support with subscriptions. Some of them I support with donations. But yeah, so I'm very conscious of the way the landscape is now, and we all, I mean, musicians especially. Well, now is a hard time, especially because COVID. But like, we all have to understand that everything is a symbiotic relationship. If we send our music to media outlets, or if we expect coverage in media outlets, we also have to be aware of what those media outlets are providing to artists in general, and that means reading and buying them once in a while. A lot of people think that things were like they were 5, 6, 10, 15 years ago, where you had a print review section in the New York Times. You had 5 albums reviewed every week in the Boston Globe or more. You had probably 3 or 4 reviews of jazz records per week in the Guardian. Now you have 1 per month. These things.
Why is that? Is
I think there's generally a perception among editors that that this stuff is just not popular, not well read, doesn't have the same click-through views as pop stories. Someplace where that has kind of the landscape has been altered a lot is the UK, where jazz is almost popular music right now. A lot of the bands there, Ezra Collective, Shabaka Hutchings, Nubia Garcia, the Seed Ensemble, these bands, Emma Jean Thackeray, and Yaz Ahmed and others, they really have hit, like, I'm not going to say pop star status, because it's not that, but it's like, it's pretty decent level of notoriety, and those people get good click rates. I mean, all the media outlets, in terms of, they all count the clicks and the page views, and they all kind of compare it to all other kinds of music, which is not really fair, because jazz is a niche music, just like electronic is a niche music, just like classical is a niche music, just like whatever, deep house is a niche music. It's like, so it's not totally fair, but it's the way things are, and they count things by like dollars and cents, and what is getting the most clicks, they put the money where that is, and that means paying people, so it's a matter of
there are
economics.
so there are far less opportunities to get noticed or to get written about. So let's say that we just met and we just began working together. What are the first 3 tips you give to an artist that you take on?
Well, I try to take on artists who have a viable social media presence, um, and I try to encourage clients who haven't built up that social media, like how I can encourage them to do so. And I have a social media person on staff, who or on retainer staff, that helps me with the kind of ramping people up to release, with various assets, taking photos that the artist has, taking the album design, and creating various assets that can be used to promote the record leading up to the record release. I try to establish, what the singles are. Like my team, Colin Perry, who is my operations manager, is also a musician, and one of my associate publicists, Taylor Houghton. Those guys and I, we collaboratively take a listen to the music, see what the most accessible tracks are, and kind of promote those as focus tracks, so to speak. We try to pick 3. They may or may not be the singles that are being released pre-release on streaming services, or for download in advance, but we try to establish what those 3 tracks are, just to get people to have a vibe for the album and what we're going to be kind of focusing people on. Like, sometimes you only have the opportunity for someone to listen to one track because they get so much, they hear so much, and they don't know what to do with it all. So that's one thing. And then the story, like I said before, the story is very important. If you don't have a good career narrative or a good just interesting life story, even if it doesn't have to do with your music, we try to conceive of something that will gain traction with the media, will be seen as newsworthy or even interesting from a human perspective, not even from a jazz or a rock or a whatever stylistic perspective, just a human perspective, So, and then the third thing, which kind of goes with the first thing, is like, what assets do you have that are not the music? Do you have good photos? Good photos are like incredibly like probably the most important thing aside from your album cover art, because a lot of people don't realize this. A lot of people's only opportunity to see your music when it comes to streaming or just whatever is if you don't have videos and stuff to promote the album with that way, is your cover art. And if your cover art isn't like instantly gonna grab you or grab a person, then it's almost not worth doing the campaign. Sometimes I've even had artists redesign their cover art if they came to me with existing cover art. I really love the music. I was like, yo, this is not gonna fly with this cover art. Like I give them a few different artists to work with as graphic designers.
Could you give examples of
Some
cover art
people, yeah. So
that you
some people
think
who do work in this area. There's a great designer who does all of Sunnyside records called Christopher Drucker, Drukker. I don't know if he has a website, but
before we go there, just to give examples of albums that you feel the cover art is super strong and grabs you immediately. And
I mean, well, like I love Walter Smith III's Twio album art. It's very grabbing. It's got the classic Blue Note feel. It's got the three circles, the green, the turquoise, and the red. It's very clear. I also really like I like everything that Logan Richardson does on his album art, even going back to pre-Blue Note, then Blue Note, then Rope-a-Dope, and now this new thing he's doing called Afrofuturism. I think his stuff is really great. I love Nicole Mitchell's stuff. She's a client of mine. Her stuff is always killing. I think, I mean, obviously the major labels have big money to spend, but I also think that almost everything that comes out on New Amsterdam Records, which is a classical new music label, indie classical new music label in New York, all their stuff is amazing.
That's the one that's been collaborating with Nonsuch on some releases?
On some releases, yeah. And also, now that you mention it, International Anthem Records has an amazing designer who works on most of their releases, who also happens to be one of their musical artists. His name is Damon Locks, and he's in Chicago, and he's an incredible graphic designer and just like conceptual artist almost, and he's really incredible. So yeah, it's worth checking that out.
So we covered social media presence. We covered cover art. What
and
are
artist photos,
photos?
videos.
The extent that you send your artists to photographers,
Well, usually when people come to me, they have already done their photos, or their artwork, but sometimes they don't, and I do send people to specific photographers depending where they may be.
And then you prepare them for about a typical campaign for you is like 6 months, 3 before it's released, and then 3 more after it's released.
No, typically a campaign runs. The billable period of a campaign runs from 3 months before the album comes out to 1 month after the album comes out. There's not that much to do after the album comes out. A lot of artists come to me where their record is kind of already out. They're kind of already on Spotify and Apple Music and whatever. And
oh, hello.
This is the dog. Andrea? Sunny came in the room. Sorry. This is life in quarantine. But go to mommy. Sorry. Yeah, so basically, you can't do much for an artist when the album is out, or even like 4 weeks or 6 weeks before it comes out. Not a lot, but a decent number of artists come to me very late in the game, and I'm like, I can't help you. Or the only thing I can do for you is send a blast and hope for the best, but like, it's not really worth it for them to pay their money to me in that situation. It's really much better to, hire someone with a lead time, because like I said, you need to get in line with all the other artists who have sent products through themselves or through Publicist or whatever to try to get, the your spot in the line. And it takes time for the journalists to get through the piles of digital files and physical product that they've been getting, and to, you have to be pitching for a specific issue or a specific time of year or whatever. When you're pitching like singles, like premieres and video premieres and stuff like that, you only need 4 to 6 weeks. But I rarely will do a campaign that's only a premiere or video premiere. I usually don't do that. Some publicists will take that on, but I typically like to work records and festivals and whatever, and I like to work with lead time. Just it makes everyone feel better, because there's a greater chance of stuff happening when you give yourself more time to pitch in advance.
So artist expectations. What do you mean by stuff happening? Like what for you would be a successful campaign with an artist?
So let me pull up something I recently did. I just sent this blast on Monday. I worked the first time with a pianist named Matthew Shipp, who I've known his work for many years, but I had never worked with him. And we did an acclaim blast. And so we got the New York Times playlist by Giovanni Russanello. We got like a 2-page spread in Jazz's magazine. We got a playlist from H&N at WBGO. We got a review in Jazzwise, including like a short interview. We got a little blurb in the New Yorker. We got a review in the Financial Times in the UK. We got a review in the London Review of Books. We got a review in Jazz Times, Pop Matters, Downbeat, All About Jazz, The Wire, and Steve Smith's blog Night After Night. And those are just like the major ones. We got many more smaller ones, like small blogs. That's a really, really successful campaign. With Aaron Parks, we got, Pop Matters, the New York Times. We got a advanced feature on NPR, web only, where they shared the first track even before the album was released. It got reviewed. I mean, if I Dreams of a Mechanical Man, I'm just gonna look at some Google search results. But yeah, we got like I don't know, a lot of stuff. I mean, and stuff is still coming in. We had a feature on France Musique that happened a week ago, and the album has already been out a month. We got all kinds of stuff in Europe. Publications in Switzerland, publications in Germany, publications in Poland. Like jazz magazines typically, but occasionally a non-jazz magazine. I've had people in Mojo in the UK. I've had people in different kinds of places. So it really depends how big the artist is already. I mean, I've been working with Aaron since on and off, but since 2008 on his first record, Invisible Cinema, on Blue Note. When I was with another firm called DL Media, they had a contract with Blue Note, which doesn't exist anymore, but Blue Note exists and DL Media exists, but that contract. So anyway, that's in my bio, but I don't actively work with Blue Note Records. Last year, I was asked to work on a bunch of records by ECM, and that was a cool experience. But yeah, so with Aaron, it's been like a building process and a rebuilding process, because for a while he didn't release any records that kind of followed the trajectory of what Invisible Cinema started. Then when he released Little Big, and now Little Big 2, that's kind of following on his original trajectory. Now he, made those records with James Farm, and he made the 2 records for ECM. One is a gorgeous solo piano record, and one is a trio record, but neither had as much to do with his personal vision, I think, as these last 2 records that came out on Rope-A-Dope. So I think that knowledge that I had of him, and that long-term relationship, both professional and personal, really helped us, achieve a quality campaign in the end. But yeah, the Ship campaign was very successful. There was another. I mean, a lot of people commended me on the Aaron Parks campaign. The Casa Overall campaign was very successful, although we had some help from Brownswood for the record is called I Think I'm Good. It's a great record, one of the best records I've been involved with. Although I have to say, Casa's first record is really possibly, besides Aaron Parks' record and Todd Sickafoos's Tiny Resistors from 2008 as well, maybe 2009. I think Casa's first record, called Go Get Ice Cream and Listen to Jazz, is probably my most listened to record of my whole career. I just couldn't stop listening to that album. So yeah.
So now that we talked about that, any artists that you kind of always wanted to work with but didn't get a chance yet?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Uh, I've kind of always wanted to work with Brad Mehldau. I mean, maybe not always, but it would be a thrill to work for him. I would love to work for Wayne Shorter. That that probably won't happen. But he's on a major label and they have a publicist. But he's one of my greatest heroes. And I guess who else? I've never gotten to work on a Steve Swallow release. I've gotten to work on a Carla Bley release, but with Steve in the band. But I would love. I'm obsessed with Steve Swallow, and
I just ordered the vinyl for the album coming out tomorrow.
Yeah. The Swallow Tales.
Yeah, I'm really
with Schofield and Bill Stewart. Yeah. I mean, and I've met Steve, and we know each other, and he's such a nice guy, and so is Carla, a great lady, and amazing composers, both of them. But I've never worked a Steve Swallow record. I've gotten to work with some of my heroes like Chris Potter and Dave Holland, and even Dave Douglas from like when I was a little younger guy. I remember being on the subway in Washington D.C. listening to Strange Liberation with Bill Frisell. I did get to work with Bill Frisell, but it was only one record, and it was a lot of fun, and I would love to do that again. But yeah, I mean, there's a whole bunch. I mean, the list goes on and on and on.
So touching on the Swallow album, that's an album that was scheduled to be a week ago, and it was postponed in 1 week, which is very
all of Universal Music Group basically said we're blacking out. We're not gonna, in honor of the movement going on here in the US and worldwide, but mainly here in the US. But yeah, they moved everything. Ambrose's record on Blue Note got moved a week. I think the Go-Go Penguin record got moved a week. The Steve Swallow record got moved a week. I mean, the Schofield record playing all Swallow tunes. Everything that was supposed to come out on all Universal labels, Blue Note, ECM, Verve, Decca, all these labels got pushed a week. So yeah, that's a very, very strange circumstance, but our country was in a very strange and important time, and it was very important that people felt like the moment was respected. But I'm not sure. I'm not in on that, but that's what I understand happened.
So, what's your take on releasing music during the heart of COVID?
I mean, everyone's at their computer, so like it's a great time. I normally tell people don't release records in July or August, but this year I'm like, what's the harm? No one's going anywhere. If they do, they're not going far from home. They're not getting on a plane to go anywhere. They're not going to the beach in Aruba. They're not, they're not going to Jamaica or Bahamas or whatever. They're not going to Hawaii. You can't even get a flight to Hawaii right now. Because the planes come here and then they go back, and they're so scared that if the planes come here and they bring back COVID, Hawaii has only had 17 deaths from COVID total. New York has had 30,000 deaths. The state of New York, the whole state. I think New York City is something like almost half of that. But I think it's a great time to release music. You have a captive audience. If you can make really good videos, or decent videos, and you can have a good Instagram presence and keep your Instagram story topped up, and keep your content flowing and have a plan, and all that stuff. You can work on that stuff with your publicist. You can work on that stuff with your label. Combination of the two, maybe a marketing expert, somebody who has an expertise in distribution. You can really kill it. Like I didn't expect Matthew Shipp's record and Aaron Park's record to do so well in COVID times, but they did. I mean, I don't know in terms of sales. I know that Aaron's record sold quite well on the first Bandcamp day, and they did an advance of that where I think they sold it a week early only on Bandcamp. and also he did a playlist takeover with Apple Music. And actually, Ambrose Akinmusri did an amazing playlist takeover for the Outer Orbits playlist on iTunes, Apple Music this week. There's a bunch of incredible records on there. Some that I knew, some that I did not know at all, but really, really incredible stuff. Um, yeah, so that's a thing now. Like the person who's organizing Apple Music Jazz is really bringing artists into the mix and bringing different vantage points like that. There's a great curator at Tidal, a friend of mine. Not allowed to say the names, but you know, he's a real jazz head. He comes from the jazz world, so you know, there's some incredible ways to discover music right now, and there's, you know, artists like Aaron Parks and cats who are in the know who are curating these playlists. So it's like now is a great time to release, you know.
So if we take that one step further, where do you think with musicians live revenue off the table for the foreseeable future, and streaming revenue being just a fraction of what people
Yeah,
use
I mean,
albums,
I will say that. So yeah, finish your question. Yeah.
where do you see the industry growing towards?
I mean, the answer that question kind of answers itself. If musicians can't work live, then they can't do much of anything. You know, they you know, if they're truly independent, you know, and have no real infrastructure in their careers, or they don't have money saved or whatever, you know, yeah, they can't put out a record during this time. It's incredibly hard just to. I mean, I can't even imagine what some of these musicians in New York are doing who have rent to make and food. They need food, and like there's no work except for lessons online, or like maybe donate something to my Venmo or my PayPal or my Cash App or Zelle or whatever. You know, it's just like it's a very, very bad economic time. Now I understand things are a little bit looser in Europe. I think that in Germany, like there's no concerts yet, but people are able to walk around, right? You're able to walk around Berlin and not without a mask, or are you wearing a mask? I don't know.
It's pretty open-ended here. You have to wear a mask if you enter an establishment, a supermarket, a bank, or
Right.
but it's pretty rough. I was expecting people to kind of storm the cafes and restaurants after being locked at home for a
No, but
uh,
everybody's nervous because there's no cure. There's no, they don't have very much knowledge about this disease. That's what we've seen. It started, don't wash your hands and don't touch your face. Okay, great. Then a month later, you definitely have to wear a mask. It's spread by droplets in the air. Then a month later, you know, it's something different, something different, something different constantly. The virus is brand new. They know nothing about it. So like, I mean, yeah, back to your original question. I mean, yeah, streaming is nothing. I mean, I kind of feel like artists should take their music off streaming during this time, especially because it doesn't provide them anything near a living wage. Yes, it's great exposure, especially to be on a playlist like this. That, you know, I just had a client write me yesterday, and she said to me, because of the placement that I got on Apple Music, I'm getting actual money in my bank account from these, like the one song she said had garnered 20,000 plays in Japan in the last 2 weeks. And so she is getting paid. I don't know what she's getting paid exactly, but, and it's probably not enough to make, you know, rent and food and all that, but it is something. So I guess I'm saying one thing and then saying another, but you know, for artists who really are struggling and their music is probably maybe not the right fit for some of these playlists, or they don't have the connections or whatever, or they don't have enough bread to hire somebody like me, you know, then like I would maybe keep your music off the streaming platforms for a period of time, and then after you can maximize your sales in that initial window of the album coming out, then you know you can put it on streaming later, or maybe 2, 3, 4, 6 months, whatever. But I know artists who, you know, I mean, the most popular one is Jason Moran. I don't know what kind of sales he does. But I know that Rope-A-Dope has a very robust presence on Bandcamp. They have a close relationship with Bandcamp. They do a lot of exclusives, or at least lately. Right now the major labels aren't allowed on Bandcamp. I think the whole raison d'etre, the reason for being of Bandcamp is to be a place for non-major labels. Although I did see that ECM has recently put up some titles on Bandcamp, like a bunch more than they ever had before. They did a little experiment a year or two ago, and then they did a bunch. So yeah, they're there, and you know,
Laments. I've been hearing that ECM really laments the decision to go on streaming. So
I mean, I bet their hand was forced by their distributor, but I can't. They're distributed by Universal, and Universal was probably like, "Yo, if you're not going to join streaming, we're going to drop you," or something. I don't know. I have no clue, but that's my, I mean, it just seemed like total non-Manfred Eicher thing to do. Um, and then he did it. And I know a lot of small jazz labels who really felt betrayed by that, and they felt that they had to go on too, because now ECM, the last big label holdout, was now on. But I mean, with the same switch of a button, they could go off just as easily, you know. uh, but like, they can make a lot of money off of streams from Keith Jarrett records, and from Charles Lloyd records, and from Harold Anderson records, and from Jan Garbarek records, and all these legends. Especially, I mean, Spotify is very Europe centric, especially in its curation. I'm sure you look at State of Jazz, you look at a bunch of these playlists, and it's all European artists, like almost entirely these days. Very few American artists, unless you are on a major label or have a major distributor like Red Eye, or like one of these significant digital distributors. But it's very it's all very random. And I tried to get in touch with someone at Spotify, and he's basically said, you have to submit through the Spotify for Artists app. You have to include as much data as you can, location, instruments, all this stuff. But he refused to personally engage with me, even though I have credible artists who are on his playlists. He was like, we do it all by data. It's all by data, So like, that's different from Spotify. I mean, from Apple Music and Tidal and Qobuz and some others that they have human beings who are experts in each genre who curate their playlists. So like, it's better to be in that. I mean, you could actually just not go on Spotify and only stream on Apple Music and Tidal, and that would be great and fine, because like, they just need to do a better job at promoting their curation. But in the jazz world, it doesn't make business sense for them to do so, because they don't make that much money from jazz. So like, I mean, they really have to sell it on the pop music element, and I just see that as being for me, a little bit distasteful. But it is interesting. I mean, Spotify is creepy in that you discover weekly how much stuff you actually do want to listen to. It's pretty crazy. So yeah. Anyway, now we're talking about all that. But yeah, I mean, you know, uh,
I wanna hand it to Fabian for a couple of his questions, or maybe audience questions. But before I do, and I want to thank you for coming. And
sure.
what's in the future for Fully Lettered Media?
Uh, like releases, or
No, just
what's
like the
going
vision
on?
of what you guys are doing in 2020, 2021.
Um, well, yeah, you can visit our website. We're updating it slowly, but it is getting to a place where it's more robust, and we'll have a bunch of packages out, uh, kind of describing all the services that we do. But like I said at the beginning, we try to offer the services that a label would offer, for an extra fee. We try to match people with the right video people, the right photo people, the right designers, all that stuff. We do consultations with artists who can't afford, a campaign that's like, between $3,000 and $5,000 US or whatever. That's a lot of money. So, um, it's we do offer consultations. Um, I don't see us becoming like a playlist curator, if that's what you're talking about. We might create a Spotify playlist for our both the clients we really love and some stuff that we love. It's not our clients, but yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna keep doing this and trying to make a living and trying to get media placements, press placements, and when I can, streaming placements with people I know, and just kind of relying on my knowledge of the music, the fact that I play saxophone and I've never worked professionally as an artist for a long period of time, but I have certainly, I sympathize with the artist's plight and I know what it's like, and um, I really have an appreciation for what they're going through right now. I mean, I can't imagine when people come to me and want to work together right now. I'm just like, sometimes I'm like, are you independently wealthy? Like, what's going on here? But
Yeah.
it's a very hard time, and a lot of artists will not release music during this period. A lot of artists will, um, just kind of lay low, and some won't be able to live in the cities that they've made home, and they'll have to leave, and hopefully they'll come back, and maybe they won't, but it's going to be a very, very tough time, and this thing is not going away for a while. Like, I think it's easy to say it will still be here next summer, maybe not all summer, but maybe we'll start to see vaccines, maybe not. The public is also kind of like you said, when Germany opened, everyone wasn't rushing back to the restaurants. Same thing for the clubs. It's gonna take a long time, and so artists are gonna kind of have to adapt to this video world we live in. And even though it sucks, it's like, you know, if that's your only way to make a living, you got to do it. Uh, some clubs, the Village Vanguard is opening up this weekend for performances without fans. I just bought my ticket for Billy Hart Quartet. I've been watching the Jazz Gallery streams, the lockdown sessions. Those are really cool. People pre-tape their stuff and they show it. I haven't tuned in yet to the Smalls Live, but I have an account, so I'll probably tune in at some point. And the Jazz Lincoln Center stuff is really cool, and even the Karina Prang in Moods.
Yeah, yeah,
She
amazing.
she
Yeah.
has a great streaming service, and there's this. I don't know if this is legit, to be honest, but I bought this album from the Jazz Club Ferrara in Italy.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
of
yeah.
Miguel Zenon, the Tower tapes. Um, so I bought that, and
I think they also did a thing with Aaron as well.
did they do an Aaron thing? They did Arjuan Ortiz and Don Byron. They did Lanzoni, Morgan, and McPherson. They did Martin Wind. They did Enrico Rava. They did Bill Carruthers. Yeah, they did Aaron Parks Trio. That's right. So I assume that these are legitimate. I have to imagine these artists would be taking issue if they weren't. But I mean, just like I said before, that it's important. I mean, we can't. None of us can save this industry individually, but it's important that the clubs get support from us. And if a club and an artist get support from buying some of this stuff, I see now they have a Tim Burns Snake Oil, they have a Craig Taborn and a Dave King. I mean, clubs are going to have to get into the business of recording and releasing music to stay alive, or they're gonna they're gonna they're,
Yeah,
they're gonna die out.
yeah, yeah, of course. So, Matt, thanks so much for all your invaluable knowledge and support and help and tips.
Does
Uh,
Fabian want to ask a question, or are we done?
I would love to ask you a question.
there you go.
And just first of all, thanks, Matt, for your time. I know it's very valuable. You could be doing 1,000 things, but spending time here with us and sharing your input and knowledge is just huge. My question's kind of in line with Dekel, and maybe just kind of to dovetail on some of the things that he was asking. When you're in the trenches with publications and media outlets, and you get a maybe not so favorable response from an outlet. How are you communicating that back with the artists that you're representing? And part two of that is, is there any type of I don't want to say pushback, but is there any type of how far do you advocate for the artist? Like, when is no a real no?
So the first part is I try to be as honest as possible with my artists. Some people that rubs them the wrong way. Other people really appreciate it. I mean, I try to when I don't copy verbatim what the journalist wrote back or the editor, I kind of paraphrase it in a less threatening tone. If it was indeed truly negative and just hostile, but I will go back to journalists who've said no and say, okay, well, would you look at it from this angle, from this story angle? I worked with a guy named Dave Metter, or Meet. I can't remember if it's Metter or Meter, but great pianist. Was in New York for a long time. Now teaches at University of North Texas in Denton, Texas, and he had an album, and really the angle that we went with for him was he came from two different kind of traditions. Like, he was originally kind of into modern progressive jazz, but then he went to this school, I think the University of Florida in Jacksonville, with Marcus Roberts. He was the main professor, head of jazz studies there. And as anyone knows, Marcus Roberts is a staunch whether you want to call it traditionalist, neoclassicist, he's all about the jazz tradition from, James V. Johnson to Errol Garner to Bud Powell to all the legends, Bill Evans and McCoy Tyner and all that stuff. So, like, he's really drilling down on the basics and kind of ignoring all the compound meter stuff, all the modern stuff that postmodern stuff that came after bebop and after Coltrane and all that. And like, Dave was conflicted between these two worlds because he really wanted to express his true voice, but he had been kind of ambivalent about not necessarily which one to pursue, but like, he was getting one thing from his teachers when he went to NYU, where he studied with Jean-Michel Pilk and with Gil Goldstein, I believe, and then he was getting something completely different from his undergrad experience. So that became kind of our angle, and it got some attention. Maybe not as much as I would have liked, but that was another angle to work besides just the music itself. So, it was that's you have to think like that. When you go to a downbeat or a Jazz Times and they don't want to do a review, maybe they'll do a track preview, a track single, a premiere or a video premiere. Those guys are pretty lenient when it comes to stuff. I mean, they have to like the music, they have to like the musicians. But like, if a journalist is stringing me along, I mean, I'll continue to go back as much as I can without seeming rude or disrespectful of their time or whatever. But that's kind of the role of a publicist. I wouldn't advise an independent artist of following that tactic. That's why people hire publicists. Because if you're just an artist and you have no credibility in the scene, at least in your name is not known. I mean, you can do stuff yourself. I know a lot of artists who just do all their PR work themselves, but it's just like you're going to be arguing for yourself. It's not going to have any impartiality and whatever. So it's just going to be seen as kind of pathetic. I mean, I could that's been told to me by some journalists. I'm not going to say who or any of that, but like it's just when you get a no as an artist, you should respect that no and move on. But you should also be pitching as many people in the masthead as possible. For those under 30, the masthead is a little strip in a magazine that indicates who writes for that magazine. Now they might not be in that issue, but they'll be in a future issue. And if you can track down their information, you want to hit as many freelancers as well as editors as possible. It might be that a freelancer has a better angle on something to pitch to an editor than you do as an artist, or even than a publicist does. Or maybe the editor prefers to hear from their freelancers as opposed to publicists. So I work all the angles. I try to hit as many people as possible. It can be a gargantuan task. I'm on a listserv where I get some contacts from, and that's helpful. But I mean, if you're working in jazz and you're going to Rolling Stone to pitch stuff, you're not going to get traction unless you have, a Terrace Martin or Robert Glasper or what have you. I mean, even cats like Ambrose and some of the others. I mean, maybe like even Bill Frisell, he's not getting his shit written about on RollingStone.com. I mean, maybe at an end of year thing, but not during album release cycle. So it's like you have to be smart, but you also have to know that like Pitchfork has all these jazz contributors, or like people who like jazz or sort of like jazz but aren't like jazz experts. But you pitch the freelancers. I almost never pitch the editors there because I don't ever hear from them. I go to the freelancers and I try to see who reviewed what. If you go to pitchfork.com/jazz, they have all the jazz reviews of the last months, years, whatever, and I just try to research those writers and hit them up and so on and so forth.
That kind of tied into my second question, and I know we're running up out of time. But you pretty much answered. You with your tenure in the industry, I know relationships is the number one thing. It's your go-to. You're only as good as your relationships in a publicity role. What are you doing? To maybe keep the relationships fresh. And continuous. And what are you doing to build new relationships?
I'm constantly trying to monitor. Like I have Google alerts on artists that I don't work for, like who get a lot of press, like Julian Lage and Mary Halverson, and on International Anthem and on Pi Recordings and on ECM Records. Whenever somebody publishes a story and I don't know the contact, I try to scour the internet and go to Twitter, go to Facebook, and or I have this private list that I'm on, listserv, that's for publicists only, that you have to be invited to, and occasionally I'll get a contact there, and then I'll go after the person. And I try not to go too heavy. I try to go with one thing that can. I know this talk is not really for publicists, but it's for artists. But I try to go at them with one thing that they might actually like. I would never pitch something that's like so far outside of what they wrote about. It's just like doesn't make any sense. But I've seen there's a guy named Daniel Schwartz who's done some great writing for Bandcamp, who is not a jazz head per se, but he is really passionate and wrote a beautiful essay on Casa Overall. So it's just like you have to find people, and you have to kind of lead them to the water. If they don't drink, that's not your fault, but you lead them there.
Excellent. Well, Matt, I want to thank you for your time, personally for getting on here and supporting Dekel and, the release and, this conversation and talk. Dekel, do you want to maybe recap the actual contest and what, the expectations and the rules are for that?
The rules are very simple. There are stems and music charts on the website. Do whatever you like with them. Any song from the album that you like, post it to your own SoundCloud. Tag me when you share it, and we'll be looking out for it. Feel free to reach out with a message, with a link, or any questions, or asking for feedback. Some of the remixes have been actually amazing. Someone from Italy sent one in today, and it's spectacular. Um, and we posted a deadline of July 1st, so we get there early, so to speak. It's been super meaningful to share the music with you guys, with the young creators or the producers, or and again, thanks so much for Matt. Matt, thanks so much for coming. We have an incredible few artists coming down in the next couple coming Thursdays. Next week is Matt Pearson, producer for Brad Meldau, whom Matt spoke about, producer for Joshua Redman, Kenny Garrett, Pat Metheny. He's kind of a legend in the jazz world.
I'd love to work with Josh Redman in case he's watching. Anyway,
then we have Damian Taylor, producer for The Killers and Bjork. So stay in touch on social media. Sue's coming on, and keep in touch and get in touch and stay safe and stay loud. And again, thanks so much for sharing the music. It really means the world to us. And we'll see you next week. Matt,
thank you guys. All right, sure. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Fabian. Bye-bye.